Hi guys, so we're back for the final lecture on Ruby. Well, as you know, this class is pretty much Ruby on Rails and a little bit sprinkling on top of that. And so with this lecture, we have dated the lecture notes here. And video will come after class. So just a quick summary to see how far we've gone. We've basically covered, a lot of topics in Rails. Let me just give you a quick, example of where all these checklists, and you cover a lot of them. So by now, when you look at this Rails structure, it feels very familiar now. If you think that you have some questions about some of these things, please ask. It's very good to know. You see how useful the generators have been in your workflow, mainly so that you put the files in the right places. A few cool things that you understand about the REST principles when you design websites that help making things simpler. This one we haven't covered very much. If we have time, I'll just mention it again. But as you do it, it starts to feel intuitively. And then you see how useful the nested routes are, but just a quick reminder, don't nest more than 2 levels. The controllers and testing, as you see, you learn a lot in this. Now, the setting up is a pain, and some people prefer to use RBF. My preference is to stick with one and be really good at it. So RVM does a little bit more, and so if it works for you, just stick with that. And today we'll cover some of the more advanced stuff in here, like interfacing with the Rake web server, and we'll write a gem, right, ourselves, just to see understanding Ruby is very useful for the purpose of building apps. But we only been learning for 8 weeks, and the truth is actually in software development, building something is actually easy. It's after that, it's fixing things, making things 10% better, 20% better. That's when it takes 80% of your total time. So debugging in Rails and Ruby and all of that, it's the troubleshooting skills. When it makes you a better programmer, is if you come from a different language, your experience is always relevant, because how you break down the problem is not that you fire Rails website up, it doesn't work, then automatically you go to your debugger. Sometimes that's overkill. Sometimes you just need to go to Rails console, print ABCD. Sometimes you add a log statement. I think about how inflexible it is. If you use a gem that it gives you, it has a bug, you think about, oh, could it be in the gem? How can you jump into that gem to fix that bug, right? So all of that comes with experiences. And then after you have the product, you show people. Now you have to deploy. We only learn deploying to Heroku in this course. Now, when you're working in the company with a team, then slowly, naturally, you have to learn more about deployment, more about analytics, about error tracking. So we're actually not covering very much of that. When you need it, you pick the tool that the company choose, and then just be really good at it. So for example, background workers, you need this to send emails, run long tasks, downloading images maybe. Or search, you have to index the whole big database so you can search, do full text search. You can, another thing would be out of the scope of this course, I'm thinking like analytics, where you actually tracking with New Relic, you can actually see how it breaks down. So those, we'll keep learning about that as we continue. But at this stage, let's cover what challenges we faced so far. Always think about what we've been having problems with, right? It's actually Rails. It's difficult to be good at Rails in 3 months. People say, oh, you have to be it takes you 6 months or or longer. So the purpose of this Ruby course is that we actually help you get within just 8 weeks. It actually feels like 8 months because you spend so much time working together, and we build things right away. But look at these fundamental challenges. Many other web frameworks are not as flexible, or they don't have as much magic. Right? With Rails, it's the convention over configuration, and then there's this they say you don't have to go for the best, but they go for what's most productive for you. So understanding Ruby is one of the challenges too, because what's the best way to generate the string to parse an array, you have so many thoughts in mind. But it's a very fascinating language because Ruby helps people write very powerful libraries. And web development, it includes so many things. Suddenly, you have to be good at HTML, CSS, database, JavaScript, and then when things go wrong, logging, debugging. So don't give up. All of them are here. With today, we're just gonna and some of the resources, right? These are pretty much what you need to keep improving your knowledge. So let's get straight to the two components of today. We walked through. One is playing with the Rake server, and then second is to build a gem, and then we can publish the gem. Right? So who here has heard of Rake before? Yeah? You have, right? So what is Rake? Can someone guess?
Yeah, I still don't have time to implement or maybe do with it, but I just know about it is a middleware in front.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's something in the middle. It's a layer, and then you have Rake middleware. So one Rake, two Rake, and all of that's like you can stack them. So look at what I have for Rake, right? Google Images. This is in English. This is a Rake, and actually in server term, these are Rake of servers. So in Ruby, actually, it's a server interface for Rake, right? No, for Ruby. So Ruby web server interface. Why is it a big deal? So to servlet, I'm not sure. I don't know. Yeah. So servlet is like what? A tiny server? What is it?
Servlet just apply web server for Java. Maybe it's been request.
Right. So that's like, well, technically, it's like WebRick or like a tiny server, web server that can run things. So Rake here, think of it as an interface. So, but basically, Rake allows you to define, okay, when a request comes, what you should reply, and it include basically HTTP response code. Now you know this already, 200, 404, 500, and you also have like 201, 203, 403, 404, and then the header, and then the body. So why is it such a big deal, right? It's 4 years ago when Rake was so hot because people keep building all these powerful web frameworks, server frameworks. So server to talk to this Rake interface. So with Rails, when you deploy on your local machine, it comes with WebRick, right? You see WebRick when you run it. In Rails 5, it comes with Puma, which is like the best web server, and they just include it this time. They also need it to do some of the WebSocket stuff, but in Rails 5. The Rails, when you deploy, these are the very popular options. You don't use WebRick because that can only do single thread, and then when the thread's busy handling one request, the request not done, you cannot do too many things. So with Puma, it's multi-threaded, multi-process, Unicorns, multi-process, single-threaded, and then passengers, like they rewrite the server in C and then make it work with the Rake interface. So it's really cool. It's a big deal where you have all these powerful web server and then they can talk to Rails. Now, on the other side, the web framework, you have Rails, but you actually have more than that. Who has heard of something outside Rails that's built on top of Ruby? Yeah, Sinatra, right? So, for example, here's the blog post here. You have Cuba, which is like a super tiny one on top, similar to Sinatra, and then Pedro is like Sinatra on steroids, but it's very similar to Rails. But people say, oh, okay, less magic, and it's better in their opinion. And then this thing is really new, Lotus, and it's like also a cool and clean way.
So I have a question. So what's the difference between Rake and web server? So what does a web server do? What does Rake do? And what does Rails do?
Yeah, what is so technically, right? So okay, when the request comes to a server, right? When the client hit the website from the website, it hits the URL and that goes to the server. Server here is like a physical server, let's say. Then IP address go there, and you need a server, a web server to receive that. So normally we have Nginx or Apache. They basically there's rules to parse the URL to decide what port to accept, to what domain name to accept, and after that it points to the directory of the app that's running the server. So technically, this Nginx can just run the Rails server directly, but what they're doing is they don't talk to each other directly. It's basically this Nginx thing will say I use passenger or Puma or Unicorn to run Rake, right? Call the Rake interface, and then Ruby will Rails or Sinatra or anything. Basically, well, they provide something that Rake can call. So technically, a web server, Rake server is pretty much similar in that sense. That how do we run a server in Rails? Rails server, right? We actually don't know how this one works, but it's actually the same as running this file. So this is a Rake file, right? So all the Rake application has this interface. So that's called an interface. Rails server does the same thing. It loads the entire app, and then it runs it. So just Rake is the interface in the middle, so that people can make better web server to talk to the web frameworks.
So I would think some jobs of the web server are,
Yeah.
like you said, so parsing requests. So you type in an address and sends a request to a server. The server needs to do some things like
Yeah.
it accepts HTTP, puts the right port, make sure it's like there's security, there's SSL, all these web server things. But those aren't related to how your app works. Like they don't. This guy doesn't usually talk to the database. He doesn't know about anything. His job is just to like parse requests. But Ruby, the smart part, that's running Rails, I would say, like your application, that's what talks to the database and does all the interesting things.
Right.
And then you see something that connects like the web server to C or something with Ruby. And they talk on the rack. Is that right?
Yeah. Basically, before this Ruby, let's say Ruby 2, right, and Ruby 1, they didn't really use Rake. It ended up being the same thing, just respond to, at this level, it's respond to the port and what request is coming through. I think it's just, when you think of it, it's just layers. So Rake is now an interface layer in the middle. And the layer is actually one of the principle of REST. Basically, let's look at REST principle here. Layered is where, let's say the client, you just talk about the client-server interaction. From the client, you just say, go to this API URL, give me the JSON file so I can render the images, or give me the HTML file. But when you say the client talk to the server, that server, the principle of REST is the client should not worry at what layer it is talking to. So it's going through, the outermost layer, like where Nginx decide what URL can actually go to Rails. Then you can actually have another layer there that basically say if you come too often, you have too many requests, you're trying to to bring my server down, I'm gonna kick you out. It's not coming to Rails. Or if you look at any Rails website on production, if you go to the assets folder root, that doesn't go to Rails. Does anyone know that? So like this is layer, but anything that's like this, when you deploy, it actually goes directly to the public folder without passing the Rails code at all. No controller, no anything, because these are just static files. So they compile it and then just run it. So that's all, as much as I can understand, where, that's why you see that it just responds to a call function. All right, go through this guy, it accepts this environment. What do I have? And then it try to process it and it pass on. And then the Rake is like, okay, everyone can follow that interface and we can do business. So it'll be clearer. I probably don't explain very well on that, but we can be clearer if we just start with this one, okay? Last time we were here again, let's take a quick look at this project. Basically, we have the photos, we render them. Last time we did the locale and time zone stuff. We also did all this JavaScript stuff where you can update, and well, I cannot comment, but let's see, I can sign in, and I can go here, and let's say I add a comment right here, right? So we've done some of that. Has anyone tried using masonry? I think some of you did, right? Did anyone run into a problem when you render the images overlap? Yeah, so let's say when it rendered, masonry arranged this, but then it rendered the images after that. So it messes with the JavaScript. So just real quick, it's to show. We actually, for example, I set up, if anyone has used masonry, that's how we set up the images here. And when you type, it actually moves things around so it fit very well. So let's say I have this function set up. But remember, we can't use document ready because we're using turbolinks. So you use document on change here. And then you have to use another plugin called images loaded. So it update the layout. If you run into that problem, then you can use this tool. Okay, so we're back to Rake. Basically, Rake is a simple app. So let's just create a very basic app with Rake. Okay, basic app. Before we create the app, I'm showing you that we can run Rake up. So that's a gem. You can actually use another. Here's a Rake gem provide. The Rake gem provides a Rake up binary that when you call this config.ru, it will boot up a server, and it uses WebRick server, right? And it binds to port 9292. So let's go there and see what happens. It's exactly the same, right? So actually, the one problem is Rails server is smarter. If you make changes in the code and you refresh, this one is not smart enough to hot reload some of the stuff. But Rails server is slightly smarter. But right now, it's exactly the same. So that's cool because I run Rake up on this file, on this config.ru file. What if we create our own file, and that's an app in itself? So let's create a hello world, hello Rake.ru. Okay. So is it my phone or? All right. So in this hello Rake, we just have something really simple. We call it like run. This is from the documentation on Rake. So let's see Rake.
So what we're doing here is nothing to do with Rails anymore. Right?
This is so we can understand Rails better, right? So here you can get this file, right? We put it in here. Basically, we run this proc. It responds to a call. So proc.new basically then you define like a block that respond to call. So you pass something to it. It say the call environment. That's all it is, and 200 status and header and hello Rake. So we'll do that. Hello Rake. So let's take a look. We just have this file, and we're gonna run Rake up hello Rake. So bound to port 9292. Let's try that. So that works, right? Now, what if I want this to work with this? I can go here and I can do hello Rake. That's powerful. You can put, it's a Rake, right? It's many server can work together. So let's make this work. So you can do that by going to the route and we're just gonna match it right here. We're gonna say we mount it up. So you can say hello Rake, and then you pass in a class that can respond to a call. So Rake is uninteresting there. I'm going to just look at Rake again because it's right now it's there's no name on it, so I can't do anything. I'm going to build a much more exciting Rake server. So we'll call it a gallery, where let's say we try to display all the photos. Okay, so gallery.rb. Now the interface is let's just create this gallery app. So it's called gallery app. Before I do that, let's open the config.ru again. This is Rails. Run Rails.application. That's it. Now we're gonna have something that responds to this, and then we can put it on Rails. So, whoa, where's my gallery? All right. So gallery app. 1 second. It responds to a call method, and we're just gonna use say hello gallery. It's a very quick app, 200, and that's it. Now this code, I just put it in the app folder. You can put it anywhere, but let's say I load this code and hello app, I will pass it to the routes. Let's see. Let me see how I can actually. I need to update the code to do that. So this is a method. I need something that responds to a call. So this is new. If you don't want new, then you basically make this self thing. So new. All right. Let's see. Actually, let's call this gallery. Sorry. Okay, gallery. Match doesn't work anymore in new Rails. So, all right. Let's see if this works. All right. So we're gonna reload it. I believe if it doesn't load, we will load it again. I believe if you put it in the app folder, it will automatically load it. So uninitialized. Actually, you need to load it here because Rails hasn't loaded all those files. So I'm going to require it understand the root directory. So require app/gallery. Does it make sense? I'm loading this file. Okay, so let's try this again. Let's run Rails server. Hello gallery. So that's kind of cool, but it's not that cool if I can't do too much. So I'm gonna make this gallery app. This is a totally different app, right? It can actually access things. If we understand Rails a little bit more, we can do that. So first,
Take a second to say what are the advantages of this approach of having a separate rack application inside your own application? Because to me, it seems like it'd be a lot easier to just write gallery controller,
right?
Index view. Why would we do this?
So let's say
maybe people have guesses on why we want this. Does anyone know why we want to do this?
Does anyone know? Guess?
I think maybe if I understand about it, we can understand the structure, maybe of Rails. Think about you can understand what the request do and how to Rails respond.
So that's for good understanding. Okay. So there's all this magic. We demystify the magic. Because there's one other reason actually. It means, let's say if you have a Rake app entirely separately built by another team, you can actually hook it in and run it if you load the code together. Yeah. So like if you have Sinatra, you have heard of Sinatra? Like there are many useful Sinatra apps that say, hey, this one is really cool. Just plug it into your Rails app. You can load it as a gem. You can put it in a folder in your project, and then go to the routes. You mount it. You add it to the route, and boom, you go to /something. Hey, it works. If you use Sidekick, Sidekick provide a Sidekick web interface. That's a Sinatra app that loads the data from the Redis database to show you the jobs, the background work jobs that are being done and the stats on it. So it's separate responsibility. So you can, when you have things with separate responsibility, then each component has smaller responsibility. It's less likely to go wrong.
So I think that one criticism of Rails that you might hear is that it tends to monolithic application, where you have one big application that can do lots of things, so you have lots of dependencies. But I mean, you can actually architect your system in such a way that supports like this microservices type architecture, where you have lots of little apps. In fact, that's basically how, like, for example, our Coder School backend is built that way, or will be soon. Where we have in one piece, for example, here you have one piece that's in charge of your delayed jobs and your background processing. One app is in charge of emailing people. You split these things into separate components, and that way, when one of them fails, you can't bring down the whole system, and you can debug them in separately from other applications.
Right, to avoid the single point of failure, right? So let's make it more interesting. If I'm pasting it right here. So this Rake app has no idea what environment. Are you on Heroku or are you on local machine? So we'll tell it, hey, all the Rake app actually also use this variable, Rake env. So Rails, you see Rails env somewhere, right? Rails underscore env. But technically you can just use Rake env, and that works for Sinatra, Perino, and all that other Ruby frameworks, web frameworks. So I'm just telling them, hey, if I don't define this, make my environment development. Okay, look at this. This is cool. I'm loading the Rails apps config file, database.yaml file, right? YAML.load, and then here I can call active record. So I'm not calling the entire Rails. Rails is a meta gem, right? It includes all these smaller libraries. I'm calling just active record, and I connect it here. So I can do this. I can define a photo. So let's say gallery photo. If I use photo, it's the same name, so there's a conflict, right? So I want this to be gallery photo to avoid the name collision. Now here I can use just like my model. So active record base. So I can do that. And maybe here I can try to print maybe last photo is gallery. Well, I need to tell it to use the photo because the name is not photo. So table name is photos. So you don't have to do this because in all your Rails one, the magic is that it guesses the name right? Here, well, you name it differently. So let's say last photo is gallery photo dot last, right? Let's say dot URL, something like that. I'm just going to do maybe inspect. And now I need to reload the server to reload that Rake app. And look, I actually can open these guys, right? So with just only this much code, you can actually have this code without running the Rails app at all. You just do Rake up this, and then you could put a config.ru file to run this. Boom, like you can load the photos and you have like super little code. So let's say I want to do something even more exciting just to show you. I'm going to copy and paste to save time. We can do the view and everything in here. So here is the, right? So let's say I built a page. I can do this. There's Rails actually underneath, it uses a builder gem. So you can look at the API here, but this is quite easy to see, right? I declare an HTML doc, and then set the meta tag, head, title, gallery. Then I'm getting gallery photo, get all of them from the database because thanks to these 4 lines, I can do everything I need over here, display the username and the images, right? And basically, the API tell you that, oh, okay, you have to return a Rake response object, no problem. And you have to pass in that object the text, which is what I just built over here. So let's see if I have that, and I run this again. I can have this whole app, right? This whole Rake app without loading the Rails stuff.
Zero magic.
So less magic, yeah, right. So the magic here is that when you go under the magic, you can get, it's magic where things work with very little effort. Rails gem is quite amazing as you understand Rails more. As you can see, like it's a gem that includes all of these guys. When you action pack is like to load your view and your controller, and then so sometimes you work on a Ruby project, you want to load active support. In lecture 1, Charles loaded this to show you how many cool things you can do with Ruby string, Ruby array, and all of that. So active support, and then active record can talk to your database. You can MySQL, Postgres, or anything like that. So that's cool with the right understanding. Now, with someone mentioned middleware. So when you get this problem, it's because we don't use the right rake. So I'll just bundle exact rake or that, right? Rails give you bin rake as well, middleware, right? Basically, you run one main thing, so just the photo application routes, and then you include all the other ones. Here's like all these layers. It's quite crazy when you look at it, but this is when requests come in. When requests come in, actually it passes through these guys. So if you want to protect your Rails application from attack, right, like a DDoS attack, right, you actually insert another layer here that can check.
Can you explain what, maybe show what some of these things are and talk about what these things are?
Which one would be good? Like this one basically, deal with the passing the ETAG header.
Do people know what ETAG is for? Yeah, it's for caching. So there's something in Rails or in Rake that automatically checks to see if the file is not changed and turns that for you. That's why in Rails you don't have to do check the ETAG because it's already happening for you.
Right.
And like if you use Flash or even params parser. Remember you had that params array that statically has all your params.
Yeah, the string and the colon are all the same. Colon ID, string ID, they're all.
Flash message, you use that.
You decide to store when you do flash error. It stores it for just one more request, and then after that it disappears. For cookies and cookie store, it's stored for longer. There's an expiration date.
We've all seen this one, the migration check pending. When you forget to do RakeDB migrate, you get that red error page. That's a piece of middleware that's when every request just checks to see if there's a migration pending. So
when you get here, this actually, I'm not sure if this is on production. So this is for development environment. And in production, some of them you see different ones. Like this is to debug your code when it goes wrong. So many of these guys you don't see in Rails 3, Rails 2.
So that's why on Heroku you have different error messages, right? You don't see the same one you see in development. That's this middleware is turned. The show exceptions middleware is turned off.
Right. So this is the web console thing, where you can actually have Ruby in here, and you can inspect the variables. So that's to say, of course, you don't want this on production. But many of this is very useful that way. Yeah.
Since these are all separate little apps, you can just turn them on, turn them off anytime. So this is why Rake is so cool. It's so flexible.
Right. So let's say now I have this guy that show me the gallery, but what if I don't want people to see this? I have this view I want to give some people, but I need authentication. But I cannot use hash secure password. I cannot use device on it.
I think a good example of this is say you have an API.
The
API has like a key, but you might be using like a JSON token. That's where I'd use this, for example. There's many ways to authenticate.
Yeah. So this one is cool because you can use Rake basic auth. And have you been to a website, usually an admin portal? They don't spend too much time coding the admin interface, so they just give you a pop-up that asks you for admin and password. That's basic authorization. You do that if you go to the router config. You go when you configure your wireless router, right? You tend to get this. So we can actually do the same thing with Rake. So it's as simple as, let's see. I want to see some example here, just to point us to the page very quickly. It's just this. So you have the middleware, and then you say, well, just add another one. If I add this to my code, when I go and run Rake middleware, I see one more. You can actually specify where it is, up here or down here, insert at what position. So that's quite cool because you can set it, and then you can say admin or super secret. This is username and password. So you see this if you implement Sidekick. If some of you put it in the app, and you will Google how to protect this view, and that's one of the basic one. And then there's a warden thing here. It's actually more advanced than that. Warden is like it's like another common authentication solution, and device uses it. And device use warden to. Sometimes you can specify authentication with it, right, based on Rake. So it's actually quite cool if you customize a lot of things with device. I like device because, like, if you keep using it, then you become really good at it, and you can handle anything. But sometimes maybe it's not a good solution because it's very complex. I wanted to show warden Rake, syntax as well, but we may not have time for that, so it's okay. You can add it as another middleware here. Okay, so that's Rake, and in Rails actually related to this. I thought I would just say it. I didn't think I should, but Rake. Can someone explain what Rake is? Rake. It's like make for C, right? What it is like a Ruby program that runs Ruby files that include some syntax, like describe task something, right? You know how to do a Rake task. So just a tool. Now in Rails 5, everything will become Rails. So Rails DB migrate and everything. You don't have you can use Rake, but they think that it's too confusing for people. If you do, but Rake is cool. We already know it provides so many tools for us, and sometimes it's really confusing. It's like related middleware where one Rake can call another, right? And sometimes you call maybe Rake db reset. No, this is very dangerous if you have a lot of data, right? Now, but you want to know what it does. So in Rake, you can actually dry run, and then it run it, but not doing anything. It just pretend to run it, and then it print you what other Rake tasks it run. So it starts with this one. It's called Rake environment. So to load the Rails environment, and then it load database config, and then it finish it up. So you can actually do verbose. And it does a little bit more. It shows you what other tasks, any other output. If it print to the log file, now it prints here. So this is not a good one. Is there one that? So it's important to if we're not sure what it does, right? Sometimes we can totally look closer and see. Maybe DB setup is a good one. If we confuse, let's say, Rake DB setup, and I want to see what it does. You see, it does a lot, right? It loads the schema. Notice it doesn't run migration. It loads the schema at the end. It's like, oh, someone already did the migration running thing, and I have this whole schema. I just load it, and then it loads the Rails environment, and then just do a little bit more touch up and seed your data. You see, so setup maybe sometimes is the fastest way to download, to clone an app and then Rake DB setup, and you can make it work for people. Okay, any question around Rake?
Have you ever written a Rake app?
Rake app.
Or when have you used Rake in your personal career?
Usually it's just yeah, you put Sinatra app or on it, a Rake app, like super basic one where you can create a web server and respond to basic stuff. So if you, that's a good experience to learn. I've done sort of just write like an app that respond to first just one request. Here you don't have any concept of routes, right? Rails took care of it. You just have a Rake app that runs something. So when someone hit the URL, you return something, and then you're like, okay, how do I add routes to it? How do I do something more to it? That's when you have Sinatra. Sinatra lets you define routes and then helper, and then you can call view templates. So doing it yourself is very complicated, but when you think deeper, oh, that's okay. That's just different layers that call each other. So Sinatra is cool if you want to check out. I think Charles liked Sinatra. I like Rails because when it's like it has everything I need, usually more, but then I don't care about efficiency. I just want to make it work.
So one time I used it, Rake, is that there's something called a deep link, which is quite popular in mobile apps. So it's how to link to an action inside a web, inside a mobile app. But if someone clicks on a deep link in your browser, you need to do something in the web app. But often, based on where they come from Apple Store or Android, you might have to tweak the URL, the path they're hitting. So based on refer, if they're coming from Google, Android, then send them to /Android/ something, or send them to /Ruby/ or /iPhone/ something. So that was a good middleware that I wrote to redirect people based on their refer, for example.
Yeah,
So
that's a great one.
You can use middleware a lot for rewriting URLs is a very common use case.
Right. Actually, I remember there's one similar. I did one that just really store the IP of people, cache it. You want to blacklist people. You get spammed by so many people, so you put a Rake. If it hits your Rails server, Rails just getting way more requests than you want. So before it hit the routes, it just basically I just check a text file with all the IP. Basically load the text file and see if the IP is in that blacklist, and then if it is, then throw it away. So every week I get some. I'll look at some more spammers. With the IP address that these are spams, you just add it to the list. So that's a good way to keep your. I mean, it's very manual at first, but that's an example.
That's good. Actually, now another one too. Last example is that it's also very common to do a heartbeat on your server, just to make sure your server is okay. So you could implement that in Rails, but it's kind of slow, and you want to hit all the time, constantly. You don't want to put that load on your server, so you can write a very simple Rake middleware to just return okay for the current time. To make sure your server's alive.
Middleware, yeah. So that's a very good question. As you see, as the requests come in through here, right? Now, when you add one, if it doesn't satisfy the condition, then it just passes through. It's super fast. It's just an if statement. Of course, sometimes if you check crazy stuff, it's very slow. But if you check IP address, it's already there. Check the URL, which is for deep linking, it's already there. So it's only slow if it has to deal with that. That middleware may do work or may not. When it doesn't, it's very fast, right? It's like no problem. So you let it pass through. You can have many middleware as long as not all of them are running, right? As long as not all of them are slow. I think it's just one way. When you get to routes and then controller and then to view and then render it. So yeah, it's just only one way. Because this is it passing the entire request. When you render the view, it just it's passed back this text. The response.
You can terminate at any point in chain. So for example, this spam filter,
right.
IP filter, you just return 400.
Right.
And this stops.
Yeah. If you put up any web server and you check the log, you see so many IP from China and in Europe spamming your site. Just crazy. If you just look at your Heroku logs, if you link it to a website, for example, yourpersonalname.com, and then link to Heroku, and then you start seeing them. Right? If you host by a server anywhere, there's an IP is already known. Yeah, it's crazy. So it doesn't really matter because it's all prevented at some point. But if they all hit the right, you know, places that make your app slow, then it's bad. You don't want any public route people get to that can make your app do a lot of work. That's when, let's say, a dashboard, right, or list all the users or the posts. You want to cache that. Don't let it hit the whole Rails thing, because if someone throw a million requests and you die right away, right? Well, we'll take a break, and then when we're back, we will implement a gem that that will spit out wise words. I have this poem. It's not really a poem. Sorry, Charles, you don't understand this one. I think it's got. What's that? Does anyone know this one? So this is like poem, and don't think you if you're bold you're a monk, right? If you listen, and then that's a good thing. So it's just like, if you think something is good, it may not be very good, and it keep going. Instead, but we're gonna build an app that basically every time you run it, then it will spit out some wise words like this, but it's random. So sometimes you're sad, you want to have some advice. I take, let's say, it run this app, right? Yeah, it will spit this out like a random one. Don't think if you determine if you want it, and you'll get it, right? Don't think if you're strong you will win, right? If you're weak, you will lose, right? So this guy is just like, think about all those possibilities. I don't know. So we'll build that gem. Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break.